All right, I think we've got a couple people on the live feed, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday, and VCU and Dayton are about to play what is a huge game this evening. And I think the winner tonight certainly clinches an at-large bid to the tournament. And I think also the winner of tonight's game will probably have a good chance of getting on the 6 or 7 line on Selection Sunday. So first, let's go over Dayton's resume. So I use a site called Warren Nolan. It updates all the RPI information immediately, and it has like strength of schedule, record versus top 50, record versus top 100, things like that. So as you can see, Dayton, on the face of it, their resume looks excellent. Usually teams who have a like 500 or better record against the top 50 and a team that's like 10-4 against the top 100, usually those teams are 5 or 6 seeds on Selection Sunday. But this is why you have to dig a little bit deeper. You can't just look at the pure numbers when examining a team's resume, because as you scroll down, you look at their best wins, and not that Vanderbilt is not impressive, not that Rhode Island twice is not that impressive, but those teams are very borderline as to whether or not they'll make the field. So what a win tonight would do for Dayton would give them a win against a top 25 or top 30 RPI team, which is really the only thing that they're lacking. Because if you look at the top of their resume, their top 50 record is good, okay? Their top 100 record is good, 10-4 overall versus the top 100. They have one bad loss to Massachusetts. That's a lot less than some of these other bubble teams. So, we're not going to knock them too much for that. Their non-conference strength of schedule is top 100. Anytime, considering that there are 350 teams in college basketball, if your non-conference strength of schedule is in the top 100, that's a very, very good thing. If your strength of schedule non-conference is in the top 50 or 25, that helps you even more. Let's compare Dayton real quick. We'll go back to Dayton, but I just want to give you an example of a team that, their non-conference strength of schedule is really bad. So you see Virginia Tech here. Their non-conference strength of schedule is 282. All right? That's not going to get it done if you're sitting there on the bubble on Selection Sunday. So Dayton definitely has that going for them as far as what their resume is looking like. Okay? So their road record is another thing that the selection committee really likes to look at. Their road record is outstanding. So Dayton has all the qualities that the selection committee wants, except one thing, which is a win against a team that's clearly in the tournament. It would be nice if Dayton had a win against, a team like Purdue or somebody there that's, a top 5 or 6 seed. But I think VCU will do the trick because, at this time, it would be hard to argue that VCU shouldn't be in the field. So I think Dayton is in good shape as of now. Even if they lose tonight, I think they'll still be fine. But their seeding really improves if they beat VCU tonight. They will definitely get up onto the 7 line. They even possibly could get up as high as the 6 line, because they would, like I said, they'd have an above 500 top 50 record, and they would have a top 100 road record of like 11-4, which is incredibly impressive. Okay, so let's go to VCU. So VCU's resume is a little bit similar. They're a couple things better, a couple things worse than Dayton. If you look at their top 50 record, it's similar to Dayton, 2-2. Their top 100 road record, or their top 100 record is 7-4. So 7-4 is pretty good. That's definitely better, like we talked about with Dayton, than a lot of top 100 teams. But the thing that VCU has going for it that Dayton doesn't is the 2 wins are a little bit better than Dayton's best wins. You look at Middle Tennessee. I've got NTSU as my top 10 seed, and then VCU also beat Dayton, which Dayton would be a clear tournament team at this time. So VCU has their wins are a little bit better. Where they fall short is that they have two questionable losses. One to Davidson, which is 108. That's really not that big of a deal. But the selection committee hates to see, they really, really do not like to see losses to teams ranked in the RPI 200 or below. And so Fordham is right on that threshold. They're right at 199. If you're a VCU fan, you want to root for Fordham to win the rest of the way. Because if they sink below that 200, not that it's like a do or die thing for them, but on the face of it, when you're looking at a team sheet, and I'll actually show you real quick let's see, what a team sheet, I'm going to show you exactly what the selection committee looks at. That's okay, I can't find it. I'll show it to you another time once I figure out exactly where it is. So, the Fordham loss is really, really hampering them right now. I think if they hadn't lost that game, their seeding would be much higher. And as you can see, their non-conference strength of schedule is 73, which is good. Anytime you're top 100 in non-conference, good. Road record, 7-3. I know a couple of those games, VCU won by the skin of their teeth, but they won those games. That's really all the selection committee cares about. So I think that VCU's overall resume is positive. It would be nice for VCU if they could get a one thing that they're missing that Dayton does have is a road win against a team in the RPI top 50. And not only would a road win at Dayton tonight give them a top 50 road win, it would give them a top 25 RPI win on the road, and that would give them 2 RPI top 25 wins because they would have beat Dayton twice. I think also if VCU loses tonight, and let's be honest about VCU's chances. I mean, you give them about a 30 to 40% chance of winning tonight. It's senior night at Dayton. These guys are a loaded senior class. I'm not saying VCU can't win it. They definitely have the talent. But, Dayton's at home on what is the last night for this group of players that have been together for 3 or 4 years. You have to think it's more likely that Dayton wins. So if VCU does not prevail tonight, I still think that they're okay as far as their at-large chances. But then you go into the A-10 tournament. And what's interesting for the A-10 tournament is that, of course, if you win your conference tournament, you're in. You get the automatic bid. But what VCU would need to lock up a bid is one more top 50 win. If they get one more win against anybody in the top 50, they're in the tournament. They're 100% lock. And so what you're hoping for if you're a VCU fan, and I know we had a couple of Twitter followers that were sort of debating this last week, you want Rhode Island to win this tiebreaker against Richmond for the 3rd spot. Because if VCU somehow does not prevail tonight and get the number 1 seed, then they would probably be the number 2. And what that means is on semifinal Saturday, in all likelihood, if both teams prevailed in the quarterfinals, they would play the number 3 seed in the A-10 semifinals. Beating Richmond in the semifinals doesn't help VCU. They're top 100, so anytime you can get a top 100 win, that's all fine and good. But what VCU really needs is another top 50 win. Considering how they played last Saturday, they were in the game late on the road at Rhode Island. I have a feeling that if VCU plays Rhode Island on a neutral court, their chances are better than 50-50 that they would win. So what you're looking at is if VCU plays Rhode Island in the semifinals and wins on a neutral court, then you go into Selection Sunday totally relaxed, nothing to lose. You're not playing thinking, oh my gosh, we have to get the automatic bid. If they play Richmond and win in the semifinals, then their resume hasn't improved that much. So while it's still probable that VCU would get a bid, highly likely, you wouldn't be certain about it. So in my opinion, from a bracketologist standpoint, you want VCU to play quality teams as much as possible early on in the tournament. So if you get a win or two like that, you've already locked a bid up by Selection Sunday. Let's talk about Rhode Island real quick. let's see. Let's go back to the resume. Okay, so Rhode Island's resume is extremely complicated. They've got a couple of great things going for them, and they've got several factors that are really, really working against them. Okay, their non-conference strength of schedule is one thing that benefits them in a huge way. So, top 25 non-conference strength of schedule is absolutely outstanding. The selection committee wants to reward teams that play tough non-conference schedules. And if you look further on the resume, what they have that nobody else in the A10 has is a signature non-conference win, especially a signature non-conference win away from home. They beat Cincinnati on a neutral court. That is absolutely massive for them. So what Rhode Island has is 2 wins against teams that are going to, Cincinnati is 100%, they're already locked. VCU is, 80, 90% likely to make the field. So Rhode Island has 2 RPI top 25 wins, but beyond that, they don't have much else. And if you look at their top 50 record, 2-3, it's a little bit below 500, which is not that big of a deal. But if you look at their top 100 record, so if you add these up, then Rhode Island is 4-7 against the top 100. I've seen worse in terms of teams that make the field that get an at-large bid, but it's not a very strong asset on their resume. In addition, they lost to Fordham at home, which, like VCU, that's not a good, thing to have on your resume. They also, who's the other? Yeah, they lost to LaSalle, which, LaSalle is sort of bordering on 500. It's not the end of the world, but they've got a couple of bad losses, and their top 100 their top 100 record is not very good. In addition, even though they played that strong non-conference strength of schedule, they played at Valpo. It was close. They lost. They played at Providence. It was close, and they lost. At Houston, close, and they lost. What do all these teams have in common? Providence is probably in, but these are other bubble teams that probably would miss the tournament if they did not get their automatic bid. So the selection committee might look at this and say, well, if they can't get a road win against these really teams that are probably going to the NIT, then the selection committee might say, well, this team doesn't deserve to get in. But the other thing that you have to take into account with Rhodey is that they were extremely injured early on in the season. I know Jarvis Garrett really didn't. He was out with an illness throughout the conference schedule, and he only recently came back 100%. So I'm hoping for the A10's sake and for Rhode Island's sake that the selection committee takes into account that Rhode Island is now finally 100% healthy and they're playing like it. And real quick, let's look at the teams in the A10, their Ken Palm records. The thing about Ken Palm is that it's supposed to be used as a predictive. So when you're looking at RPI, the RPI is meant to be used as what does your resume look like? What have you accomplished? If you're looking at Ken Palm, you're going to be looking at how talented is this team? What sort of elements do they have? If we select them as an at-large team, what elements do they have that would portend for them to be successful once they get into the field? So VCU is 46 in the RPI, Dayton is 31, and let's find Rhode Island. Rhode Island's 53. Okay, what is important when you're looking at this is to see if there's any incongruency between the RPI and Ken Palm. With VCU, there's a little bit. So they're 23 in the RPI and they're 46 in Ken Palm. That's definitely a little bit, incongruent, but I think the important thing is, for example, if a team is outside of the top 50 or top 60 in Ken Palm, So if you look at UNC Wilmington, for example, their RPI is in the low 30s or maybe upper 30s, but their Ken Palm is 59. So the selection committee might say, okay, maybe they've just gotten, some beneficial wins. Maybe there's some RPI manipulation. Are they really as good as their resume says they are? I think with the A10, that's not really going to be an issue. I think Rhode Island's there's 53. That's decent enough. VCU's 46, and Dayton is almost spot on with their with their RPI rank at 30. And so I think as we head into the A10 tournament next week, Rhode Island's got the most to prove. Rhode Island has to win their last 2 games this week. And then you would need to see them at least advance to the A10 semifinals. If they do that, then I think it's pretty much 50-50. It's all going to depend on, what other teams on the bubble do. If you look at my seed list right now, I've got, I wanted to blow this up, but that's okay. So if you look at the seed list right now, I've got Rhode Island at 45, and behind them, my last 2 teams in are Illinois and Kansas State. And then if you go to my first teams out, Vandy, Cal, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, Pitt, TCU. All right, so you want these teams to lose as much as possible, although for a team like Dayton, you might want Vandy to do well because, and VCU as well, because Vanderbilt played Dayton in the non-conference, and Dayton won that game. Vanderbilt played Middle Tennessee State in the non-conference, and Middle Tennessee won that game by 23. So you have 2 VCU opponents that beat Vandy. So it's a little bit more complicated if you're a VCU or a Dayton fan because, if Vandy's resume improves, then your resume improves a little bit. But for Rhode Island, you want these teams to lose, okay? You want to see Marquette, teams like Providence. Although at this point, I'm starting to think that teams like Syracuse, Providence, and maybe even Marquette they're not locks yet, but they're getting there. So what you're talking about now is maybe 3 teams that are you're vying for 3 spots between about 10 or 12 teams. So Rhode Island needs to win out this week. They need to at least advance to the semifinals, and then their hopes are sort of squarely on, what else breaks, good or bad for them. The other thing to consider are bid stealers. So, for example, let's say, okay, so right now you would have Cincinnati projected as your American champion because they've had the best season, they have the best record in the conference. Let's say a team playing in the American that has no chance of consideration for an at-large bid, like UConn, for example, which is where the tournament is being played. UConn is not in consideration for an at-large bid. If UConn were to shock everyone and win 4 games in Connecticut next week, and they got a bid, then what that does is you would have to take the last team out and you would have to put in UConn instead. And then everybody from the last team out down would get bumped down 1 spot. Let's say that somebody won the A10. Let's say St. Bonaventure goes on a run and takes away a bid from the last 2. Then you're talking about 2 teams that would steal a bid, and you would bump everybody else down 2. So if Rhode Island's in this last 2 in, then that's not a good situation. I have them as my 3rd team in the tournament, away from the first 4. So they're really sweating at this point. So if there's a 3rd conference where a team, let's say somebody wins the Conference USA, and the selection committee decides to give a bid to Middleton, an at-large bid to Middle Tennessee. So let's say that somebody like UAB won Conference USA. Well, then you're really in trouble because now you're talking about 3 teams that get bumped out of the field that would have been at-large selections, and you would have to use one 2, 3. These would be the last 4 teams in the field, starting with last 4 at-larges in the field, starting with Seton Hall. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. It's very complicated as far as the criteria that the selection committee uses, but overall, I think VCU and Dayton are in good shape. Regardless of the result tonight, I think Rhode Island, for them to feel confident, they need to win one more game. So hope you guys enjoyed. If I have time tonight, I will gladly hop on YouTube. If you have any questions, please shoot them at me at Twitter at BracketMarch, and we can I can answer whatever you want. It doesn't have to be about a team in the A10. It could be about anyone. Or if you have a question about what the selection process is, I'm happy to answer that. Okay, thanks for joining, guys. We'll talk to you later.